It is the purpose of this video to make chemtrails not a fringe conspiracy theory, but a well understood and accepted fact.
Bands of very distinct cloud cover moving into the region. That is not rain, that is not snow. Believe it or not, military aircraft flying through the region dropping chaff. Small bits of aluminum. Now, they won't confirm that, but I was in the Marine Corps for many years, and I'll tell you right now, that's what it is.
We're talking about military chaff. Basically, it's Canadian military doing some exercises, airplane exercises out here. And what they're doing is they're dropping chaff.
Military or something going on, the government, the Air Force, they send out what's known as chaff, and rest assured there's something going on there.
Well, you heard them. Those are various meteorologists, weathermen, all alluding to secret military or Air Force objectives going on in the skies above us. The first document I wanted to look at is from 1966. It's called A Recommended National Program in Weather Modification by Homer E. Newell. Over the past 20 years, experiments have been conducted on weather modification, particularly on the effects of seeding clouds with such materials as silver iodide crystals. The results are limited. Under suitable circumstances, it has been possible to augment precipitation by 10 to 20% and to reduce the frequency of fire-producing lightning strokes. This is a 1966 document, so the only point I wanted to illustrate was that since 1946. Recommended principles. I just wanted to highlight a couple of these. The potential dollar savings in lessening the destructive effects of weather and the potential gains in enhancing the beneficial effects are so great that expenditures of appreciable dollars on weather modification research and application can be justified. So, they're looking out for the taxpayer dollar. I mean, these guys are good. Honestly, though, despite my sarcasm, that's not a terrible thing off the top. The other one I just wanted to highlight here, there must be regulation and control of weather modification activities. Must be regulation and control. I agree once again. So those are 2 points I do agree with. As we go on, I will agree less and less. They break it up into this bill that's being introduced, or this recommendation, identifies 4 departments that they want to carry out different operations and give money to. One of them is the Department of Agriculture. It says here, can be considered in terms of 2 major categories right here in the center of the page. Number 1, direct modification of weather. Okay. And number 2, ecological and supporting research. Okay, yeah. So once again, you're tampering with the weather, so that's cause for concern, probably some ethical stuff, probably some, I would think, biological ramification, depending on how you're doing it, but it says that they want to support ecological research during the investigation. So, okay, fine, we accept. Here we go. Project Skyfire. That present program has been underway for over 10 years. Okay, so Project Skyfire, 10 years in, with some moderate success, they said. They want to expand lightning investigations, per number 1 here, and then number 2, they want to increase the performance of larger scale seeding experiments. Seeding experiments are what this video is all about. I mean, these are trails of dispersed, aerosolized chemicals high in the atmosphere by an airplane that some people might call chemtrails. They might. It's okay. It is a trail of chemicals. That's the suggestion here. Okay, so that's what they want to do. That's what they want the Department of Agriculture to do. They want to reduce lightning strikes, increase seeding experiments. Got it. Okay, the Department of the Interior. All right, says here they were going to give them $3 million in 1967. They expect that to go up to $35 in 1970. Those are in 1970 dollars. I don't know exactly. You could probably multiply that by somewhere between 5 and 10 in 2024 dollars, I would think. Don't quote me. Looks like I only marked one here. The program to date has included, appropriately, cloud seeding efforts, research involving the acquisition of field data in all the experimental areas, and climatology. Okay, fine. So, Department of Agriculture and the Department of Interior are both going to be embarking on cloud seeding efforts. Got it. Moving right along here, the ESSA program. They recommend $1.5 million in 1967, and they expect that to go up to $25 million in 1970. These are some of the objectives of the ESSA. They want to be able to modify winter lake storms. Okay, these storms form in early winter when shallow continental cold air blows across the unfrozen lakes, picking up moisture from the warm water surface. Okay, so collision, cold, and heat. That typically, as far as weather patterns go, is usually a destructive thing when that happens. But they want to be able to modify that, and they don't specify in what way. But they want to be able to modify that. I have a few others marked here, but we'll just skip to number 4. This says cumulus dynamics. This is part of Project Storm Fury. Sounds aggressive, but it involves the continued study of cumulus dynamics by means of the release of heat of fusion through seeding with pyrotechnics. Okay, well, pyro is fire, and seeding are dispersed chemical agents. So they want to see what they can do if they lay pyrotechnic, heat-producing chemical agents in the atmosphere to affect cloud dynamics. That's what they want to do. 1966, been going on for 20 years at this point. We are 80 years past the original inception of these types of projects. Just keep that in mind. And number 5 is hail suppression. I mean, fine. If, hail, somewhere in this document they mentioned property damage. This is a very easy document to find. Just take the title off the top there, punch it into Google, you will get it. I highly recommend going through this document in full. I just wanted to point these out. They don't exactly have to do with weather modification, but just take a look. In addition to theoretical studies and data analysis, some important present and planned efforts are. So, along with, this is also going to be happening. Round-the-clock radar surveillance and data recording. This should provide means for determining association among severe storm occurrences and topography, time of day, season, and synoptic meteorological parameters, and will provide a body of control data for the better evaluation. Round-the-clock radar surveillance and data recording. You're going to need an infrastructure of various sorts to be able to accomplish that. And just maybe ask yourself at home if you know of any of those infrastructure projects that are being built or have been built or what have you. Installation of additional meso-network surface stations between existing ones now located 10 to 15 miles apart. That's what they were 60 years ago, 10 to 15 miles apart. How much closer have they gotten? How many more of these installation centers do we have? What kind of radiation output do they have? I think those are good questions. Number 4, the construction of a 10-centimeter Doppler radar for improved velocity measuring capability at longer range. Fine. And number 5, the development of improved means for direct digital recording and processing of conventional and Doppler radar data. So I would imagine these are a series of sensors and computers. That's all I'll say about that. I don't, it's out of the scope of this video. Maybe we can touch on that later. Okay, the NSF, the National Science Foundation. This is the 4th program underneath the set of 4 that was proposed. They get about 5 mil in 67. They expect it to grow to 20 by 1970. All right, so yeah, I have a few highlighted here. Cloud electrification. Computer analysis kind of goes in with the sensor, digital interpreting infrastructure that we talked about a second ago. This is the only one that I liked, I think. Socioeconomic, legal, and ecological consequences of weather and climate modification. Yeah, very level-headed stuff there. Of course, you know, that segment was probably put in there to appease people. Just like, see, we're gonna keep an eye on things, don't you worry now. So, that's fine. It's in there though, and assuming they're genuine, maybe their intentions are pure. Maybe their intentions actually were pure. I don't know if they still are or ever were, but maybe at one time they were. That's possible. Okay, so that was the 1966 document. Detailed all the things that we just talked about. Very interestingly, this report came out of Washington just a year later, actually later in that same year, but this was not published until January 1967. And if you come down to the subject with me, it is titled Weather Modification in North Vietnam and Laos. It's called Project Popeye. A lot of people are familiar with that, but if you're not, it essentially is exactly the sort of weather modification technique described in the 1966 document. Cloud seeding of aerosolized metallic particles to induce rain or produce like a desired weather effect. And I mean, here we have clear-cut, certifiable evidence of not only its use, but also its effectiveness. They sort of bombarded the Ho Chi Minh Trail with these chemicals and induced rain for like a week at a time to flood their supply lines. So that one, this is a very important document. You know, for people who say that it's not real or it doesn't exist or it's all theory or science fiction, I mean, we have clear-cut evidence that as early as 1967, we had semi-operational means of largely affecting weather. Project Popeye would eventually bring together the United Nations. The United Nations. Gosh, I'm so glad the United Nations got involved. Because they drew up a treaty called, it says here, the Convention on the Prohibition of Military or Any Other Hostile Use of Environmental Modification Techniques. It's called NMOD. Then it was signed by 48. Today it was signed by 78. But it essentially, scope of NMOD here, states parties undertake not to engage in military or any other hostile use of environmental modification techniques having widespread, long-lasting, or severe effects as the means of destruction, damage, or injury to another state party. Okay, that's the treaty, that's the convention. It says, will not engage to another state party. Language is important, and I just wanted to bring attention to the fact that it does not specify whether a country can engage in those sorts of activities on its own soil. So I'm not saying that we are carrying out those operations, but I'm saying according to the UN Convention NMOD, it wouldn't be excluded. That's what I'm saying. Alright, so that's relevant. This ultimately brings us to it says here, the National Weather Modification Policy Act of 1976. So we went to 66, we saw for 20 years that these programs have already been carried out. They got money from the government. Our military used them in Vietnam with a marginal degree of success. The UN got together, said, look, pal, shut it down. Me versus you, but you versus you, we don't care. And so that brings us to this document, 1976. This one, we're not going to go through this one in the same detail. I just wanted to show you the title there. I just wanted to bring up 2 paragraphs from the document that I think are relevant. The primary federal agencies concerned with weather modification activities are the Departments of Agriculture. We remember that one. Commerce. That one's new. Right here. I see Interior, but Defense. So the DoD. Okay, so what started probably is maybe even a relatively benign operation of just civilian activists looking for less forest fires, and less hail, has crept its way into the DoD. Okay, now Big Papa's involved, all right? Plus the Environmental Protection Agency. I can't even hate, honestly, because if they were genuine, and if the EPA wasn't corrupt, not saying it is, but it might be. And then, okay, so continuing on, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. So now we got NASA in on the fun. Okay. And then the National Science Foundation, so the NSF. They were there before. I thought that was relevant. And then really the second paragraph is just a reiteration of a lot of the things from the 66 document. Federal government spent about $20 million compared to about $3 million. Okay, so we've cranked up the funds. For such activities as fog, cloud and precipitation modification, hail and lightning suppression. Not that we want to increase those things, we only want to suppress the bad stuff. And the amelioration of severe storms and hurricanes. So once again, we just want to help. The DoD, the Department of Defense, their primary objective is to ameliorate severe storms. Because that's just the kind of guys that they are. That brings us to 1996, where this document, under a Freedom of Information Act request, we'll call it a FOIA, I don't feel like saying all that, brought this document to light. It was produced by the Air Force, various lieutenants and colonels mentioned here. These are the operations that they deem were partially capable at the time or that they foresaw as being fully operational by 2025. These are precipitation enhancement. They say these are military objectives here. You could flood lines of communication, decrease comfort, whatever. Storm enhancement. A refreshing stroke of honesty. With all the ameliorating of storm fronts and suppressing lightning and reducing hail and just all those good fuzzy wuzzies that we were doing earlier. Now they're just like, yeah, we want to ramp some shit up. Respect, I guess, on that front. Precipitation denial. Okay, implied. If you can increase it, I'd imagine you could decrease it. Disrupt communications and radar right there. And then fog and cloud removal. So pretty basic stuff. If you're a clandestine military operation hell-bent on total world domination. I'm going to try to be quick. I don't want to... Okay, what do we mean by weather modification? Enlighten me. Today, weather modification is the alteration of weather phenomena over a limited area for a limited period of time. Within the next 3 decades, the concept of weather modification could expand to include the ability to shape weather patterns by influencing their determining factors. Mouthful. Achieving such a highly accurate and reasonably precise weather modification capability in the next 30 years will require overcoming some challenging but not insurmountable technological and legal hurdles. I love that legal hurdles bit. This is the, hold on, this one might be the one that was some cause for concern. In the broadest sense, weather modification can be divided into two major categories: suppression and intensification of weather patterns. In extreme cases, it might involve the creation of completely new weather patterns, attenuation or control of severe storms, or even alteration of global climate on a far-reaching and or long-lasting scale. Now we're talking. Okay, now I'm listening. I wasn't before, but now I am. On the other hand, the weather modification applications proposed in this report range from technically proven to potentially feasible. They are similar, however, in that none are currently employed or envisioned for employment by our operational forces. I wanted to include that in there because they did say it. Whether you want to believe that or not, who's to say? That's all. Okay, so this diagram contained within it, do you remember in the 66 document we talked about the need for a vast sensor array network connected to probably a series of computers or a supercomputer capable of interpreting millions of points of data that are constantly changing and evolving as like a weather front is coming in? All these points of data are being collected and then like interpreted by a computer. Well, fear not, because they've envisioned this and then they've sort of conceptualized it here. You can see various satellites. These right here are these sensors. These are ground-based microwave emitting towers and radar towers that are sending and receiving the messages. And they perform a few other functions, but we'll get into that in a second. I like this graphic a lot. So we have our network. We have this is our constant data collection stream is coming in. Obviously, somewhere you have to have a human interpreter, so that's what this guy's doing. Eventually, he's going to interpret that data and then come over here to decision, which is probably going to be handed down from above. But then he contacts the Air Ops Center, and they dispatch. They employ the mod tools. And what do we see here? I mean, it's an airplane. It's an airplane. To dispatch aerosolized metallic particulates high in the atmosphere to achieve a certain weather effect. I mean, it's a trail of chemicals. A chemtrail. That's what they are. I'm sorry. That's what they are. And the concept of operations, they're a little bit clearer. It's not, you don't have to interpret. It says it right here. The number of specific intervention methodologies is limited only by the imagination, but with few exceptions, they involve infusing either energy or chemicals, or both, I didn't say that, into the meteorological process in the right way, at the right place, and at the right time. So infusing chemicals by means of cloud seeding. Cloud seeding is a chemtrail. It is. It's a chemical trail. It's a trail of chemicals. I'll do my best to use the scientific terms, but that is what it is. Okay, this other section, which they're titling Communications Dominance via Ionospheric Modification. Here's one excerpt from the paragraph here. A number of methods have been explored or proposed to modify the ionosphere, including injection of chemical vapors, still more of the same, and heating or charging via electromagnetic radiation or particle beams, such as ions, neutral particles, X-rays, MEV particles, and energetic electrons. So not only are we injecting chemical vapors high in the sky, but we are also stimulating them, or energizing them, or ionizing them, depending on how you want to phrase that, with high-powered beam-forming microwave radiation. that's the template here. It goes on. Ground-based modification techniques employed by the FSU include vertical HF high-frequency heating, oblique high-frequency heating, microwave heating, and magnetospheric modification. There is a graphic down here that sort of gives us an overview of what all this entails. Okay, so you have your normal ionosphere here. If you were going to try and transmit a radio wave, a communication radio wave, and use the ionosphere as sort of like a kind of like a relay tower, conceptually, you can see by all the points of contact that is meant to depict that it's inconsistent and sporadic in nature. You know what I mean? It's not like a sheet of metal where you just like ping it off of it. Very unpredictable and unreliable. So what they've devised here is to have two ground-based microwave beams that fire at intersecting lines through a highly conductive aerosol medium, the chemical vapors, the injection chemical vapors that they mentioned earlier. And through that process and doing that, you will have created, hold on, this graphic depicts this better, a artificial ionospheric mirror that they call an AIM. These can be tuned to specific frequencies. So if you wanted to secretly relay communications, this would be good. If you wanted to jam enemy communications, this would be better. If you wanted to communicate vast distances without towers, this would be probably very effective. I think there's extreme weather events that can be cooked up with creating this highly energetic ionized mirror that they're talking about, but we're going to leave that off the table for now. This is what they've given us. Okay, so those are our documents that we're going to go over today. It's just 3, but it charts through about 60 years of documented history that the U.S. government has with weather modification. I wanted to visit these really quick. I think the documents do enough, but the registered patents, I think, really just sort of drive the nail in. You can read the title here: Combustible Compositions for Generating Aerosols Particularly Suitable for Cloud Modification and Weather Control and Aerosolization Process. We're just going to read the first paragraph. A combustible composition for generating aerosols for the control and modification of weather conditions, consisting of a readily oxidizable substance selected from the group consisting of aluminum, magnesium, various metals. Okay, so this is a combustible composition. This more than likely, it probably even goes on to say it, this is going to be a fuel additive. So it's not like, you know, people try to envision these chemtrail operations as like these guys, these masked bandits and flipping these switches, and maybe they do in some instances, but in this case, this is a simple fuel additive, okay? So these things are taking place potentially without even the knowledge of the pilots themselves. So there's that one. And I don't know if you guys have stayed up on this topic at all, but lately, in the last 7 to 10 years, there's been this huge push towards the necessity of reducing global temperatures. There's a lot, that's a rich topic, and you can't really breeze over it, but we're going to. And I just wanted to show you a few of the patents here that exist for that as well. This one's from 2009, as you can see here. Atmospheric injection of reflective aerosol for mitigating global warming. So once again, these are nanoscale materials that suspend in the atmosphere for quite some time. And the theory is that as they're suspended here, that incoming sunlight is going to bounce off, be reflected out into space, drop global temperatures. Whether you think that's necessary or not is beyond the scope of this video. Here's one last patent. This is, most of the other ones, the global warming ones, are probably based off this one. It's from 1990. It's the stratospheric Welsbach seeding for reduction of global warming. Once again, you know, the geoengineers for a while were saying, hey, look, no, we're using sulfur, we're using sulfuric ash. It would be similar to the compounds that a volcano releases, and they like to point to that ancient period of time where a volcano erupted and the sulfuric ash blanketed the atmosphere, the sunlight bounced off, global temperatures came down fine. So that's what they said they were going to use. In the Welsbach seeding patent, we can see here they go on about pretty much what I just said, and then Welsbach materials. The oxides of metal, e.g. aluminum oxide, are also suitable for the purpose. So they just kind of slip that in there. Like, hey, just keep in mind, like, well, I mean, it's not, we didn't exclude aluminum. Aluminum is neurotoxic, the body has no use for it. Okay, just a few more things. This one I thought was interesting. China is making this claim. They plan to be able to modify over half its territory by 2025. And down here, according to the meteorological organization, the WMO, there's 50 countries already using weather modifying tech as it stands today. So this is not a secret. At least some of the operations have been made more or less public. The question isn't if it's happening. The question really does boil down to the true intention behind it and to what extent. The last thing I wanted to show you, especially in light of that insane hurricane season that we just had in Florida. This is from 2001, and this is honestly not surprising based on the nature of the documents that we just went over, of the status of the already achieved level of technology that we had since apparently the late 1940s. This is not that surprising to me. But let's see here. U.S. makes weather control powder. The Florida-based company Dynamat used a military aircraft, one, to drop 4 tons of its powder onto a developing storm cloud. The cloud disappeared from radar screens which were monitoring the experiment. Just interesting. I didn't see any military tankers. I didn't see Airbuses. I did not see any mobilized effort to quell the ever-increasing intensity of storms that just demolished Florida a few months back in hurricane season. So that's pretty much all I had for today. We have a paper trail, we have government documents, we have source of funding, we have the various departments that have been involved, we have the military documents of people being brought in, we have various patents. What we did not discuss are soil samples. We didn't do witness testimony. We did not do the European parliamentary proceeding, which investigated HARP and various other U.S. Technological advances in weather modification. There's a lot more to cover. This is just the first video. I wanted to give a base, a factual base of reasoning on which people can build and sort of base their opinions on a subject like this. So thanks for watching, and stay tuned for part 2.